before I launch into this video, I was going to say that my little co-host would probably be absent. Rather than being on my lap snoring, she is in the hallway waiting because it's Saturday morning. Saturdays is when she gets to go spend the day being spoilt rotten with her aunt and uncle. However, while she is actually waiting in the hallway for them on her little bed, I did just hear a bit of snoring going on. So if you listen carefully, you may still catch a bit of my co-host in the background. Now let's move on to today's video. This is one of those videos that is just a classic example of why you need to do your research before you come to Australia, why you need to talk to people when you come to Australia, basically why you need to be prepared when you come to Australia. You'll see what I mean as we get into it, but I thought it was definitely a really good example of what not to do when you visit Australia. Now, before I launch into the video, I'm just going to mention that even though my co-host is asleep in the hallway, my cat has decided to go into crazy mode. So you're probably going to hear all sorts of banging and clunking and crazy noises in the background while she does her thing. It's never normal here.
So today we are heading into the Kmart to get a cooler to stock for our drive to Sydney, Australia, which is like 13 hours. So we figured we would fill a cooler and just have some food here so we didn't have to stop a whole bunch. And here we go.
Okay, so first thing we need to point out is that in Australia, the journey is just as wonderful as the destination. Meaning that if you are going to travel from Adelaide to Sydney, there is potentially between 3 days to a week's worth of experiences that you can have along the way. Filling up a cooler that you bought at Kmart with snacks and driving for 14 hours, that's just not what you do here in Australia. And I'll get back to talking about the driving overnight thing shortly.
We are Blue Linen, and this is our story.
Look, everybody, look who's driving through the bush.
And hating her life.
She finally stepped up and got behind the wheel.
Passenger princess, I'm taking a back seat.
We got a late start that day, and as a result, we soon found ourselves at a crossroads of sorts. Either we were going to push on through the dark, or divert 45 minutes out of the way to post up for the night.
Okay, first of all, you'd know if you were driving in the bush and driving from Adelaide through Victoria up to New South Wales. There's very little state forest, I think, that you're going to drive through. And what I saw in their images there was basically just rural, regional highway. It's not exactly the bush. If you're in the bush, you're going to be surrounded by trees like chockers. You're not going to be able to see paddocks and stuff. That's just regional Australia. Now, I just have to point out, if you've not been to Victoria, the silo art around here is just amazing. I haven't seen this one. I'm thinking, based on the route, maybe it's towards Horsham or something like that. If someone can let me know where it is, because it is utterly beautiful. But yeah, there is some utterly stunning silo art, and I have to say I'd love to see more of this around Melbourne as opposed to some of the really ugly graffiti that you see when you head into Melbourne on the train.
After some gentle persuasion, I convinced the team to march forward into the night. I told them, If we just sacrifice tonight, we will be thankful tomorrow morning when we have a much shorter drive ahead of us. I said, just think of the nice comfy beds and the cooler full of snacks awaiting our arrival.
Okay, so before I get into the logical reasons of why you just should not be driving through the night on Australian roads, I'm just going to suggest that for those of you from other countries who perhaps don't listen to logic and like to do things their other way, maybe you should watch Wolf Creek before you come to Australia, and that might deter you from driving during the night. Okay, why don't you see Australians driving through the night to get somewhere? Yes, you get some. Most people will stop for the night for two reasons. First of all, wildlife, especially kangaroos. These roads in the regional areas at night time, you're not going to see that roo until you're right on top of it. And that can really screw up your car big time. The reason why we have tourists come to Australia and have road accidents, and we do have road deaths from tourists in Australia, is because they underestimate the amount of wildlife that exists on our roads, and they do dumbass things like deciding to drive on a regional road through the middle of the night. Now, how much traffic are you going to see on this regional road through the middle of the night? Not a lot. What happens if you hit that roo and you total your car? You could be sitting there until the morning. You could be injured. If you're not injured, you could be sitting there with a totaled car in the middle of nowhere till the morning, because there's a possibility that you may not have mobile reception. What if your car actually breaks down on this road in the middle of the night? If you have no mobile reception, you're screwed. If you have a rent-a-car, obviously they've probably got something in place where you call a number if the car breaks down and they organise someone to come and rescue you, probably done through RAC. But even then, you're going to be waiting for hours and hours on a dark road in the middle of nowhere. And trust me, in the middle of nowhere with your car lights off, that's going to be pitch black. So, really, if you're coming to Australia and you want to go to Adelaide, but you also want to go to Sydney, first of all, question yourself whether it would not be far more practical and possibly cheaper to fly from Adelaide to Sydney. Or presumably, because it was a family of three, they thought it was going to be cheaper to hire a car. Don't be wallies. Do it over 2-3 days. Drive through the day. Have a look at the sights along the way. Stop in some of the beautiful towns along the way. Then make sure you book ahead of time somewhere that you can stay, so that you're not driving through the middle of the night.
So the last time you saw us, we were buying a cooler at Kmart for our road trip. So we were going to drive about 8 hours today and get to a place called Hay, Australia, and stay the night, and then get up tomorrow and drive the rest of the way to Sydney. Well, we got here and it's about 10 o'clock at night, so we've been in the car for how long?
I don't even know, 10 hours.
Yeah, like 10 hours. And we stopped at Hay, and we've been to about 7 different hotel, motel, whatever you call them, different ones, and they're all closed. Like they get people in, you have to be in there by 8, and then they just close and leave. Like, what if something happens? So now we're about to drive for probably 2.5 more hours to Wagga Wagga.
Wagga Wagga.
Wagga Wagga. And hope to God they have a hotel for us. Otherwise, we're going to be like Sailor and sleeping in the car.
Yes, of course, hotels, motels, etc. in Australia are not going to be open for you to check in at 10 o'clock at night. And this is for the reasons that I have just explained. Australians don't travel that late into the night unless they are truck drivers and they're doing it because they have to do it, and then they're going to sleep in their truck at a truck stop. Most intelligent people are going to find somewhere to stay before it gets dark. Most intelligent people are going to at least look into the area that they are headed to, and if they are concerned about bookings, book ahead. You can't rock up somewhere at 10 o'clock at night in Australia and expect places to be open, because we just don't roll that way. We're not America. These people truly are lucky that they didn't end up being one of those road fatalities that you hear about on the news. You know, an American family has had a really bad accident and are going home in a body bag because they decided they wanted to drive all night on Australian roads. Now, I'm sorry if I sound too harsh, but I'm calling it as I call it. Now, yes, I do sometimes drive late at night. That's if something is on. But I've been driving Australian roads for 30 odd years. I know to reduce my speed. I know to look out for roos, wallabies, any other animals that might be on the road. I'm extremely cautious, and I certainly would not be driving at night after already driving 8 or 10 hours through the day, because you're not going to be alert. So you've got even less of a chance of seeing that roo that's going to jump out into the road in front of your car before you even know it's there.
Good morning.
Good morning, I guess.
How was sleep?
What sleep?
Sailor, how was your sleep in your hotel room last night?
The sun really did look brilliant as it crept over the horizon that morning, and it is a view that I will always hold on to. It is a view that was far superior to the reality of the situation we were in, however. With a full day's drive in front of us, no sleep, we had to endure everything from endless stretches of highway to crows.
So this morning when you saw us, we were waking up in our hotel room that we stayed in. We've basically been in the car for now over 24 hours. We drove from Adelaide to Sydney, which last night when we tried to go halfway and find a hotel, we got there at 10 and all the hotels closed at 8. We called around a couple that were 2 hours and 45 minutes away from where we were and decided that it was not a safe option with all the kangaroos hopping across the highway, and the exhaustion that we had. We pulled over in a gas station and slept behind the gas station. This morning we got up, hit the road. Within 10 minutes, we had 2 crows, giant prehistoric looking crows, fly into our windshield and our front of our car. So that was a good time. Drove to Sydney, got our Airbnb. Kind of dirty in there too. Like, look all down there. Gross. Not over these people who are paying their friends to give good reviews. That's what I feel like is happening. No. And it was disgusting. Like roaches and crumbs of food, smashed bugs on the wall, food on the wall. So we contacted the guy on Airbnb and pretty much demanded that he gives us our refund. So now we're back in the car and it's like 7:30 at night and we're trying to find a hotel.
4824 he ripped us on.
For
the pleasure of walking into his dirt apartment.
So now we're trying to find hotel number 2, second night in a row.
I'm sorry, but as she walked around that Airbnb, to me it actually looked quite lovely. If you are going to be that pernickety that you're actually going to look at the skirting boards for dirt, I'm pretty certain that you would struggle to find a hotel that was cleaner than this Airbnb. You can see the dishwasher and the sink are shining. You know, they had to really look for things that were wrong. And seriously, seeing them going around the Airbnb like that, doing like a property investigation, you've got to be kidding me. Sorry, but there is something wrong with these people. I know I'm being overly critical in this video, but I'm kind of just not liking what I'm seeing here. These are the kind of people that give Americans a bad reputation. And can I say, $48 for an Airbnb these days is a steal. So if it's not 100% perfect, I really don't think you should complain, because you're going to be paying at least double that for a hotel room or for a cabin somewhere. And yes, my co-host suddenly realised that I was recording, so she's back in here with me, snoring like a buzzsaw.
Go.
Woo! Welcome, we made it.
And we've discovered the Art Gallery of New South Wales. Free entry, so hey, why not go check it out?
We only spent this afternoon in Sydney, but we did find some time to explore a tiny piece of the art gallery, which was lovely. I particularly enjoyed this piece titled Alice in Tokyo. However, if you only have a few hours in Sydney on one of those days that make all the other days worth it, then there's only one true destination.
We've made our way down to the iconic Sydney Opera House, and it's absolutely gorgeous down here. Totally changing my opinion of Sydney after the horrors of last night on the outskirts of Sydney. Downtown, whole different story.
Do you think Sydney will be your favorite place in Australia?
I don't know, we'll have to see, but everybody says Melbourne's where it's at, so I suspect if everybody says Melbourne's where it's at, then that's where it's at. But no shade thrown at Sydney here, because it is absolutely awesome down here.
We need to go over there, because that's where the seal is.
Okay, we'll walk over there. We got a gorgeous view of the downtown too. All the buildings right here on the park. Looks like they're still building a couple. Got a perfect 70-degree day down here. A little cool in the shade, but perfect in the sun. Yeah,
Perfect in the shade.
perfect in the shade.
It really was perfect in the shade that afternoon. It was a comfortably casual day where Sailor, Ashley, and myself got a chance to just enjoy existing in a place where we had nothing to do and not enough time to do it in. Sailor even got the chance to check out this local legend called Benny the Seal, who hangs out at the bottom of the Opera House.
Benny the Seal. I love that. That is just the coolest name for a seal. And it makes me want to go to the Opera House just to see Benny. I do have to say, they were showcasing some of Sydney quite well. You know, you can see the nice weather. I can see why tourists do like Sydney, because it is warm, it is sunny a lot of the time. You are right there on the water, so it does have some positives.
While we did enjoy this afternoon, it seemed appropriate to get out of Sydney on a high note. So we left Sydney the next morning as soon as the hotel told us that we had to check out.
So we left Sydney about an hour ago. We're on the road. to Melbourne. We got a ways to go. We're gonna stop overnight at a little cute, quaint boat town. But as we were driving, we saw a thing that said Sublime Lookout Point, so we pulled over to check it out, and it is beautiful.
So basically, they drove for 14 hours from Adelaide to Sydney to spend one day in Sydney and turn around and head south again. Okay, it makes no sense. I'm thinking that when they planned this trip, they possibly didn't realise how big Australia was. Now, honestly, if you are hiring from one of the bigger car rental companies, then you can hire a car in Adelaide, drive across the Great Ocean Road, go see Melbourne, then head up the east coast to Sydney. Do it that way. Leave the car in Sydney and fly out of Sydney. To drive for 14 hours just to spend one day in Sydney and then turn around and head south again is insane. Adelaide to Melbourne, I'm not entirely sure without looking it up. I know Bendigo to Adelaide is 7 hours, so it's probably similar, maybe a little bit more. There's so many beautiful stops along the way between Adelaide and Melbourne. And of course, the beautiful east coast from Melbourne, a 5 hours drive across to Lakes Entrance, and then you've got beautiful towns all the way up to Sydney. Could have been a really nice trip, other than spending 14 hours driving just to spend a day in Sydney.
Decided to pull over. I mean, you can't get a better spot than this to pull over and make lunch.
As we made our way along the southern coast between Sydney and Melbourne, Australia's natural beauty was starting to reveal itself. For all the guilt that I was having about getting out of Sydney so fast, it was in this moment that I knew we had made the right decision, and it was time to let that guilt sail away.
Okay, so I may have been overcritical before, and perhaps the reason they only spent a day in Sydney is because it is so very crowded and the traffic is so very horrible. I will confess, when I did my road trip, I couldn't get out of Sydney fast enough either. So maybe that's the reason. Maybe it's not that they had only ever planned on spending a day there. Maybe they spent a day there and went, okay, yep, that's done, let's go and head down the coast. I still would recommend not doing a 14-hour drive between Adelaide and Sydney like they did. I like that they are heading back down the coast and doing it that way, and that's how they should have done their trip to start with.
We had a proper road trip experience on this day. We wandered down the coast for as long as the sun would allow, stopping at all the coastal attractions we could find.
All right, we just pulled up in Kiama, and we're getting ready to go check out this blowhole. So come on, let's go check this blowhole out. Oh, she blew.
Oh, that was the biggest one.
That was cool.
Now that was a blowhole that did not disappoint.
I have to say there is something really spectacular about blowholes, but I'm also going to comment that may have been an off day for this particular blowhole, or perhaps it just doesn't quite compare to the blowhole on the Tasman Peninsula in Tassie, possibly because the hole where the blowhole is in Tassie is way bigger, and you get that on a good day, and that's just amazing. I'm glad that they are taking their time down the coast this time and actually catching the sights. This is how you do a road trip.
We got up this morning and headed to Ulladulla, which was like 30 minutes away from where we were staying in Sussex. and there's this really cool lookout, and we've already seen like 10 whales. Granted, they're kind of far, so hopefully we can zoom them in on for you all to be able to see. But it's migration season, and they are migrating to Antarctica, and it is really cool.
Two of them
That
right
was,
there.
yeah, there's two right there.
What an awesome experience. I have to say that's one thing that I missed when I did my road trip. There's a viewing point at Sale where you can go out and whale watch. But I was there it was in winter. It was like July, I think. So there was nothing to see. It was just cold and windy, which seems to sum up Sale perfectly for that time of year, I think. But yeah, being able to see the whales like that would have been so cool.
So I'm not sure what video one's gonna be yet, but I know Australia kicked our butts week one. We pretty much spent a week driving around the continent. We're all exhausted. We didn't really have too much fun, and we're really just a little bitter about the whole Australian experience the first week. We're getting ready to pull into Melbourne here in about an hour. We're gonna spend several days in Melbourne. We're gonna drive the Great Ocean Road before we make our way back to Adelaide. And we're gonna see if we can't find the true Australian spirit this second week.
So as I said at the start of the video, the journey should be as much as the destination. In other words, if you're going to go to Australia and you're going to travel between different places, look up what there is along the way where you can stop and you can enjoy the country, because there are so many wonderful sights. There are so many wonderful places that you can go and see. And driving 14 hours overnight in the dark to get from one capital city to another is not the way to do it. And like I said, now they've gone from Adelaide, they've just done a straight hit Adelaide to Sydney without stopping essentially to take in any of the sights. They've completely missed up through the centre there where, you've got so many wonderful towns and stuff up through the centre that are worth going to. And then from Sydney, they've basically done what I would have recommended, but it sounds like they actually did it over a perhaps shorter period of time. So they've gone from Sydney, they've gone down the coast, down to Melbourne, and then across to Adelaide. But it sounds like they've spent most of the time driving and not actually stopping and enjoying places. So I think the lesson here is take your time. If you're spending a week travelling in Australia, take your time. You don't have to travel 8 hours a day. You can drive 3 or 4 hours to the next town if there is something there that is worth seeing. You might find places where you want to spend several days. I know for me, I've spent probably 3 or 4 days at Lake's Entrance because it is such a beautiful place and there's so much to see there. Likewise, Port Macquarie. I stopped there for a few days before heading further north, got as far as Byron Bay, turned around, headed back, and then spent a week at Port Macquarie because it is such a beautiful place. That's how you do Australia. You don't do long drives where you stop for 5 minutes and have a look at the ocean and then keep driving. Or in the case of their trip from Adelaide to Sydney, driving 14 hours, part of that through the dark, where you are putting your own life and your passengers' lives at risk driving in the dark. And then they admit that they continued driving the next day after not really getting any sleep because they had to sleep in the car. So they were then driving on busy roads with no sleep, putting other motorists at risk. Think about the risks involved when you come to Australia and you plan your road trips. Talk to the rental company where you're renting your car. They may have suggestions. Talk to some Australians. They may have suggestions. And if you're going to pay $48 for an Airbnb that looks like, for the most part, it is pretty clean, but you have to actually get a microscope out so that you can see the dirt on the skirting boards, then you probably shouldn't complain. I can guarantee you're going to pay over $100 for a hotel room, or if you want to go with cabin accommodation, these days that's upwards of $150 just for one night. Okay, I know it's been a while since I had one of these rant videos, but there you have it. Sometimes they just come out. So if you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also hit the like button. And feel free to say hi to my co-host in the comments down below. I know that she's getting quite a following on both my channels now, apparently. So yeah, hit the like. Leave a comment below. What are your thoughts? What are your suggestions for people who want to do a road trip in Australia? I've kept it fairly brief. I could go through a lot of suggestions, but I'd just love to hear other people's suggestions, other people's thoughts. So thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.